Okay, ordinance and resolution for consideration, resolution supporting Chester County Municipal Grant Program for the Bondsville Mill Park, and this would be HUD and Jim.
Good evening. We're here in front of you tonight to discuss funding for the horticultural garden project for the Bondsville Mill Park. As you know, there are currently two main components of the park. There's the historical component and there's the natural areas, which include the trails, the picnic areas, and existing gardens, the butterfly garden. And it's already a significant asset to the township. And the development of the park has been driven at its core by a dedicated core of volunteers that have allowed its development to happen at a fraction of the cost projected in the master plan for the project. We've been good stewards of the township's money and the grants that we've received for the project. The horticultural gardens project will be the third and significant component of the park, and it will be a draw in and of itself. The horticultural gardens project also addresses the last major remaining item in the master plan for the park project. We've already addressed the natural areas with the trails. We're working on the buildings. The concrete pad area in front of the mill buildings is the last major area to address. The use for that area as presented in the master plan was to be activities along the lines of art displays and open air markets with planter boxes and pathways to break that area up. The concrete pad in its current condition is a hazard due to its irregular surface, breaks in the pad, and holes, and something needs to be done with the concrete pad itself. That is why it is so fortuitous that we've had someone, the likes of David Culp, to come along and lead the development of the horticultural gardens for that area. Not only does it address the concerns of the existing pad itself, but it significantly raises the caliber of the experience for that space. It will be a regional draw that will feed the local businesses and increase property values. I personally know of someone that is already marketing their property with regard to proximity to the park. Beyond the large garden in front of the mill buildings, David also plans to address the landscaping in other areas of the park and develop smaller gardens throughout it. We're close to finishing the main elements of the park project, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we're working on cost estimates right now for the remaining building work that's to be done, so that we'll have a comprehensive cost estimate towards the end of the project. We'll know what the end game is. We've identified grant opportunities that are significantly going to support the Gardens project. One grant is with the county, and to support that grant, we're applying for a grant with a DCNR for state grant, and that would reduce the commitment from the township financially to 10% of the grant value, so we're going to get a lot of money for a little bit of bang. And we're proposing that the fee in lieu of open space fund be tapped for that, which is money that is geared towards recreation and open space to begin with. So both David Culp and HUD Volts are here tonight. David's going to talk to some of the details of the garden project itself and the benefits of that, and HUD is going to discuss the details of the grant opportunity to us. Thank you.
Good evening. Happy to be here tonight because I happen to believe that you should kind of garden where you are and take a space and leave it better than what you found it for the future residents of this township. The mill itself and the gardens there are an homage to the past. It's where working people lived and their lives, and I believe they deserve a garden as good as we can give them. It's what made America. It was industry and mills like this. Before .coms and Amazon came around, it were mills like we have up and down Beaver Creek, and I think we need to celebrate that fact. It also speaks to the future. this garden design, I hope. It's kind of where ecology meets aesthetics. It's going to speak to sustainability. That means low maintenance, no spraying, low water requirements. I think we can educate people how to do this in their own personal landscapes. The removal of the concrete speaks to erasing our carbon footprint and replacing it with something else. What I've heard from other people who have viewed this plan, that it's like few others that have been done in the area, yes, even the state, because it's going to be a naturalistic design in juxtaposition with a very formal landscape. If I can show you some of this, I can show you on the map itself. The mill, okay? I drew the design, and the concept was to make it a usable space. You will see these lighter green spaces. Those are event spaces to have art shows, to have sculpture shows, antique shows, art classes in it. These are all within the context of a garden space. We have a very formal structure with the mill. That's why I chose a somewhat formal underlying geometric design with a very naturalistic planting. Okay? This is all going to appear as you come across the bridge and look down as a meadow. All these events will be held within a garden. Since I last was here before you, our engineer, Nate Klein, has really upped the tempo with his drawing here. The parking spaces, a rain garden, all very future. You know, it's a future use of the land. And I certainly applaud all the open space area here. This will, I think, really look nice and work well with the architecture of the building. And I'll show you more of that later. This whole space can be used as an educational element for other buildings such as this, not only in our township, but in other areas that have structures that need attention. This is a way to use that. I'm not the first guy to do this. There has been other public spaces in downtown New York that have become a very big draw as the High Line. And also, I live a mile from the mill. I'm close to it. I've lived in the township since 1990. I'm also aware of what it can do to real estate values in the area. Significant economic impact on real estate values in two recent studies by the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Research indicate just by cleaning up a property, you can increase real estate value by 10%. But the cleaning and greening of vacant lots has a much larger impact by increasing the value of nearby homes at least 30%. So we're accomplishing several things with this project. Aesthetics, cleaning up our environment, giving people a template for the future, and as well as having a positive economic program for our area. I have my little clicker. You moved it around. You've seen this before, and I'm so proud of this design, what you've done, Nate, raising it up from a concept that we did right after the mill. I'd also, before I go here, like to introduce the committee members. We have 12 members of the Horticultural Committee. Sandy Moser, who is going to head the outreach, the Friends of the Garden. We've had so much response from garden clubs of America, church farm schools, volunteers from Winter Tour and other public gardens, that I've had to limit the number of people on the Horticultural Committee, but we want to get them involved in the project. Sandy started it with the butterfly garden. She's well known in the community as a horticulturist. I think she's perfect for this outreach to head that committee. We have Kai Peterson, the owner of Sunleaf Gardens. He did the concept plan and the drawing here. You can look at it later. Matt Ross, who is the education director at Longwood Gardens. He is very active on the committee. John Lilly, he had a landscape design company of his own, and he's also one of the lead guitarists for the Hooters. Bill Hendrick is a nursery owner, and he's also involved with the John Hershey trees restorations, both in Downingtown and here in the area. Glenda Byron from Westchester, who is a horticulturalist and community activist. Chris Fellheiber, a section gardener from Chanticleer Gardens in Wayne, PA, recently noted as one of the best public gardens in America. Chris Hewlin, the director of and manager of Harmony Hill Gardens, our own East Brandywine nursery. Adrian Martinez, who did he's an artist and an art historian. He did the alcoves at the White House and the drawings at Camp David's on the walls. And we have two distinguished members at large, Hudvos and Jim, both on the horticultural committee. So I think we have a well-rounded community group here with the horticultural committee itself. Got a lot of momentum to sum it all up. The garden itself, I'm going to repeat this. You've seen it before. We've come a long way since November. We have the ruin garden, which was the initial name. You see the front, the concrete pad. We're going to try to remember what brought us to this space, what the DNA of the space is, the mill itself, and reflect that in the garden space. Concrete pad could be considered a hazard, actually, as you said, Jim. Here is the plan, somewhat formal. Nate's is much better in the underpinnings, but the design itself is going to look much like one of my clients in Delaware. The open spaces, there are pathways through this meadow that you can't see because it's only 3 feet tall. As you look through it, it's kind of like they're hidden. So these spaces will be in a context like this. That's a 2-acre garden, much the size of what you're looking at here for a private client in Wilmington. The pathways are completely hidden by the vegetation. This particular garden, the first year that I put it in, besides the initial planning, took 2 weeks of maintenance, only taken down once a year in February. Sustainability. Going to use a lot of native plants. The majority will be native plants with a mind to pollinators and invertebrates, which the pollinators feed upon. It's going to be all about ecology and education. It's going to have different color roll-throughs throughout the season. This is how the end, looking down, might look outside of the border with native trees like Nyssa sylvatica, native trees like our red oaks surrounding the garden space. There'll be secondary growth shrubs and trees in the garden itself. There'll be cultivars that are named varieties of native plants like sumacs with an emphasis to seasonal color. We'll start out the year with several thousand tete-a-tetes or daffodil bulbs that can be viewed from the road. It will move to a spring look surrounding the mill, framing the mill itself with our native dogwoods and our native red buds with an effect something like this. We're doing some memorial planting trees on this, okay? And there's already been a lot of interest in placing memorial trees here. That's how the mill will be framed behind it. There'll be native plants like Camasias following it. There could be naturalized plantings. In June, we'll move to like daisies in the meadow with Baptisia. This is also a native plant. All of these are native, low maintenance. Seed mixtures to fill in until the perennials grow with chicory and poppies. You can see how that's going to look, hopefully, if you drive by Osborne Road this spring. There'll be trees around it with a lot of drama, like our native magnolia ashii up on the upper end of the mill. We'll have a real strong color effect in the summer with a butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa, and Agastache, both very long lasting. It'll be a purple and orange reed moved to summer. Around the mill itself and in the garden, we're going to allow for some secondary growth perennials or biennials like verbascum. You'll see this along rows, but we're going to incorporate that into the plant itself, all with a very loose kind of naturalistic planting style. Along the pathways, they'll be softened with stipa and other ornamental grasses. How the design will work, it will be a matrix of grasses with the perennials coming out them, and there'll be a roll through each season of a different color. You got the design concept? It's very easy, low to maintain. We've already done a cost analysis on the planting. I think there's a lot of excitement around the choice of plants. We're not there yet. We're still moving with it. A lot of design work. Questions, comments, where we are now? Bud?
Evening, members of the board. Glad to see you getting with the program, Kyle. As you know, I've been supervisor emeriti for a couple of years now. I happened to land on this committee a long time ago, but I became more active when I had more time. And I have to tell you, it's been exciting. I hope you all remember tonight as being the night when the Bondsville Mill reached critical mass, because I think that's where we're heading. I have to tell you, when we got these numbers from Nate, it was sticker shock. We were thinking we'd just pull up the concrete pad, throw some dirt in, and plant some flowers. Well, you know, it's not going to be that way, not with Dave Kolb and some others. Thankfully, they've guided us the right way. And we have to obey the prevailing wage laws and obey other bidding processes. So we're here with a much larger number than we anticipated. However, you know, thankfully we had some guidance last year. Get involved with the grant process, figure out who has the money, qualify your projects, and thankfully Jim and I have been doing that on the side. So when we got these numbers, we were already pretty far ahead with the county. We realized we would qualify for coverage if we put our program together and got our numbers together. And with the help of Nate Klein and his drawing, which we've already showed it to the county, we believe we will qualify for a $500,000 250 grant match. Now, you have before you tonight probably a resolution that says we're asking for $237,000 from the Open Space Fund. We're not doing that. We don't have to do that. Because of my inexperience, and thankfully Judy Thomas took the time to educate us, we are only here asking tonight for $47,500. And that number comes from the actual grants, the actual numbers from phases 1 and 2, the removal of the concrete, and the installation of the soils. So those numbers are reasonable estimates by the township's engineer. County didn't bat an eyelash, and they basically said, okay, if the township isn't going to front the other 50%, go to the state. So we met with Drew Gilchrist from the state, who was very excited about the project. I can't say enough about him just coming down here on a moment's notice, but he did. His pitch is it's unique, it's different, it's green. It's going to be a model for a lot of different townships that have the same type of issue with unused properties or orphaned buildings. They wanted to go as much as it can with the team that we have in place. They recognize that this is something that they can use to demonstrate to other townships how to repurpose their landscape with projects such as this. So DCNR's requirement is they will do a $500,000 grant. It's a 50% match. They don't care where the match comes from, so how things lay out now. And I'll just use $500,000 as an example. $500,000 grant would be $250 from the state, $200 from the county, and only $50,000 from the township. That number is whittled down somewhat because our numbers were distilled somewhat a little bit better by Mr. Klein. So the resolution should be amended to indicate that we're only anticipating the township get, contribute $47,500 from the fee in lieu of open space fund. Now, there's a couple different steps here that the township has to go through. I wasn't here for the last meeting, but Ms. Camp correctly recited that we have to abide by certain rules and regulations. We have to put a declaration of easement on this property. I was surprised to find out we hadn't when Jay and I were still on the board and we acquired the property by eminent domain. We didn't put an easement on the property because we knew we were going to own it. But now that we're going to take some money from the county and from the state, they're going to want an easement on there, and we have to do that. And good, you know, we don't want anybody else to build on this. That's why we rescued the property in the first place. The other thing I discovered, interestingly, is that there's no deed to the property in the township's name. Since we acquired it by eminent domain, we just took it over. But we have to create a deed, recite the easement, and then put that on the deed to be recorded in order for us to get our grant.
The declaration of taking got recorded in the recorder of deeds.
It did,
So
but-
that serves as the deed.
Well, they're not recognized.
No, you can do a confirmation deed.
Yeah, well, we'll throw the easement
Yeah,
on there.
but
We
that's
should-
what happens when you do a condemnation. It's
Right.
not. Yeah,
No,
that's
it's no fault of
typical
anybody. It
practice.
was just, they want a deed.
Yep, that
I-
makes sense.
okay. We all know how to do that, so. All right, so there's a couple different scenarios here. One, you have to sign a contract tonight that basically they have their own rules and regulations that indicate that you're signing a contract that does not have a final number on it yet. And the reason for that is that we don't know the final number yet because the DCNR grants, the application is April 10th, not February 28th, and their award is later in the year. The good news is that when the county gets their information together, they will share their information with the state. They will talk together, and they will find out, are you going to give them the full measure of their grant? And then if they do, the state will also chip in and say, well, we will too. If for some reason we only get one grant, we only get a state's grant, I don't think we're going to be coming back to you and saying you have to match up, you know, the other 50% of the 250. It's your option to do it. If you're all behind us at that point and there's no other uses for the money in the open space account, you can certainly do that until the state steps up. But we could also scale back, it's the county's term, not mine, if we reach a point where we only have half the money in place that we need to complete phases 1 and 2, and we don't get the state's money, we can come back and say, okay, we only want 125 from the township, 125 from the county. So there's a couple of different options, and what you have before you tonight is a resolution that should be amended to say we're only seeking $47,500. That has to be signed, and then there's also a contract where you just sign the page that says we want we agree that the township will participate in the grant program, and that we will later on insert the final numbers when we know if the state is giving us money and the county has already given us money. This project is so different that people from around the state and the county are already talking about it. They have a buzz going because there's nothing else like it. They recognize that it's multifaceted. It has the naturalistic features, obviously, but with the advent of the horticultural garden, it can certainly become an event center. I've attended many other events, fundraising, Longwood Gardens being one, the Highlands out in Bucks County. Those places all charge fees for the use of their facilities. There's no reason why we couldn't look to that at some point in the future. Once this parking lot is in, certainly the growth of the project could be exponential. The township obviously would own that, could set the fees, could get various other organizations involved to help with the parking of vehicles, shuttling of vehicles, things of that nature. So we know that there's a lot of good in this project. It certainly wasn't something that I envisioned when I first gave the yes vote to acquire the property. I was just trying to protect it, kind of like the bottling plant, keep it from being a nuisance to others. But now, I think it would reach its full potential, and we have somebody else to help with the heavy lifting. The township has been great so far, supportive. I've been there when we needed money, but this is similar to acquiring Lot 2. Most of that was acquired with grant monies from both the county and the... DCNR. Was it DCNR? Okay. All right, so that was $680,000, ironically, too, and 2/3 of that money came from those other entities. So we're here again. We have a project. It can be split into phases. If we get this done this year, get all the money in, we'll be back next year to do phases 3 and 4, a much lighter number to be shared. But we're kind of limited by what we can do with the grant monies that are available to us this year. So we would like to get phases 1 and 2 done, get the support from the township to sign the resolution so we can move forward. The submission for the application to the county is due next Thursday. So if you have that's why we're here tonight. But if we get that in, we'll know quickly whether or not we're going to get their full support. And then April 10th, we submit to the state. We'll know by June if we get their support.
Real quick,
Questions?
I noticed some of the audience members and I myself was taken back. You had said that the Bondsville Mill was acquired by eminent domain. I didn't know that. What were the circumstances behind that? Because was it one of those, somebody needed a tax write-off, therefore they asked us to do that, or was it?
Those that have lived here for a while remember the mill as being nothing but a hulk of property falling down. Kids were in there all the time, creating mischief, breaking windows. It had fallen into disrepair, and it was overgrown. What sparked it were two things, I suspect. One was a developer. One of the Tabuses was either selling it or buying it, and they wanted to put what I would consider to be an inappropriate townhomes or development or something along the hillside there. And we thought they were crazy. However, we didn't want to, just give up the property to a developer. So the Open Space Committee, I think, was involved at that point, and Jay was on that at the time. And they said, well, this is something that we could probably do something with, and we keep it away from developers. They didn't want to sell it. They didn't want to. We didn't want to get it to anybody else, and we did want to acquire it for park space or just to keep it out of the hands of developers and to use it for future. So we had it appraised, and I think the appraisal price was $129,000, Scott?
Well, there were 3 different appraisals, so we went to the middle ground, which is 129.
And there was no contest as to the amount. I mean, it was the demolition costs and all of that to get the stuff out of there would have taken up all of the person's profit if we hadn't just taken it and given them the money. So there was a give and take there with the transfer of the property over to the township. But it was a horrible piece of property. You can still see the remains of it. It just sat vacant for 50 or 60 years. You can imagine what that was like.
But that was part of it. We did buy part as well. So there are 2 components to that park.
Yeah,
The original section was condemnation,
25 acres.
but then we added to it.
Yeah, the 22
So
acres.
we should have a deed to that part of it.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe me, I know.
So, I'll be, I mean, honestly with you, as honest with you as I possibly can. I'm much happier to see the 47,000 figure than I was last week to see a $250,000 figure. And I think the overall goal is awesome. I think, the garden space, I'm happy to see there's some parking, at least on this rendition. There wasn't on the last one. It was always, to me, a park you could never get to, no one could utilize, but I see the parking spaces now here. I believe Mr. Culp did say February pruning for the one garden that you did, and
Yes.
would that be the same situation for this?
Yes.
Every February?
Because the underlying plan of the space itself is going to be grasses, ornamental grasses, it only has to come down once, and it has to come down in February before the bulbs come up. Other than that, it's just a succession of bloom.
Okay, you know, I had stressed concern with the maintenance for our public works department. If, you know, if you guys feel strongly that you have the volunteers that will be able to help, you know, my biggest fear is the younger generation. I can tell you, I look at my own kids and if they don't have a video game in front of their face, they don't even understand what a flower is. So I'm embarrassed to say that, but it's the truth. And down the road, you know, people's idea of maintaining isn't going to be the same as yours and mine today.
Which calls for the natural, that's what I call sustainable design. It's that naturalistic, looser kind of design. And I think the millennials relate to that even more because they are so wired to the computers and games that they need to connect to a natural space. And what they do is go through parks and walk through. So this is a way to educate and help a new generation get back to nature by the design itself.
So, you know, me personally, last week to this week, the difference of $200,000 makes a huge difference. Obviously, the addition to the parking spaces, which I was starting to worry that, again, it was a park to nowhere. And just from that simple meeting a couple, last week or 2 weeks ago, at our morning session, I probably received 4 or 5 phone calls stating, "Are you crazy?" You know, I'm okay with the 47 or 40.
That's
Yeah.
500.
47.5.
But I wanted it to be noted, I wasn't,
We could tell.
yeah.
I mean, look, we knew we had to ramp up our game. We got Nate involved, and we said, look, here's the project. Give us some real numbers, prevailing wage, contingencies, engineering, you know, and because the county said, do it. I mean, we want this project. They want it to go.
Well, I was here with the Bondsville for the presentation.
Yeah.
We weren't aware that we didn't have to commit the full half.
Right.
Right.
From the township and wait for the state grant to come in to readjust it. The county's accepting 10% up front with acknowledgement that we're looking to
applying.
the state, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So if we don't get anything, project doesn't go.
Right, right.
If we get half a loaf, we'll come back and talk about it. Can we scale some of this back? What would the numbers be then? But that's a discussion in June.
And then the other thing is just a reminder, and I'm sure you all know this, you know, the conservation, with the MPDS permits, people have to find places to get rid of dirt, and I'm sure that I think they have to get approval from the county on when they're dumping the dirt. So
That's why Nate's here, I know.
So there's tons of people who are looking for places, and as long as the county approves it, if the county's backing a project, I would have to think that they would be open arms welcoming this dirt for free, provided it was something that met the standard.
I think Dave needs to
Well,
talk
there's
about that.
dirt and there's soil.
Yeah.
And I believe in taking care of the garden from the soil level up. You start with the soil prep. My company that I work for in Connecticut has been involved in all the major parks in New York, Battery City Park, which fell because the soil prep wasn't right. They had to quietly replace it in the course after its 4th year because the soils weren't up to spec. And that caused it caused an uproar in the boroughs. Let me just leave it at that. So you start with the soils. If the soil is well drained, it's going to be poor, not overly rich, but the soils make the life of the planting. Do it right once, and don't go back and have to redo it. The plants that I showed you are very lean. They don't need a lot of fertilizer.
Yep.
But they do need good drainage. So we're going to have to amend the soil to make sure the drainage is correct.
Yeah, and a lot of these developers are selling these topsoils from their developments. They're selling those, you know, right off of their own project, and then they're putting the worst of the dirt, so to speak, on your graded lot. So well, God knows there's a lot of development going on around here. I'm just trying to think of ways to save some money
The
with.
plants are the easy part, okay? It's the soil and the infrastructure, that's what we've got to start with first, okay? And,
What was your budget last year?
Well, our budget last year was 176. Most of that, 178 came from the open space fee in lieu, and most of that was for the building restorations.
And then what was it the year before? Because didn't you guys want to
One-
stabilize some buildings for emergency?
125?
189?
The year before, wasn't that the $80,000 year?
89?
No, I think we got 125 from the general budget one year, 176 from the open space last year.
I mean, my opinion that I do like the Bondsville Mill. I think it's great with all the volunteers and everything. But it's almost, I'll be completely honest, it's almost embarrassing that we're talking about a park when we have our fire company doesn't have heat right now and has a leaky roof. So I think, you know, I'd rather see money go towards their needs and stick with our budget that we came up with each year, whether it's from the general funds, whether it's from a developer's fee in lieu of a budget's a budget, and we haven't even determined what our build-out potential is now to find out what the needs are for how much recreation we're gonna need in the future. So I think to put all our eggs in one basket, even though I think it's a great idea, I don't think that's really financially responsible. So I think, if it was up to me, I think we should allocate the funds to the fire department.
So
This
unfortunately,
is
Mr.
open space funds.
Yeah, you can't touch that.
What funds are?
I
Money's
mean, I'm
money.
sorry,
Yeah,
as
but you
far as
can't
the
use open space.
fire
You-
department,
would
I
rather
agree with you.
General funds to help them out than
Sure.
use open space funds above and beyond your budget. I think that, just because there's an account sitting there with money that can only be used for recreation doesn't mean we have to go above and beyond our planning for that year's budget anyhow.
All right, well, there's the RETU plan from 2010, which has a cap of $4 million for the whole Bondsville Mill Park. We're nowhere near that,
No,
okay?
but we've spent about $1 million.
4 million. I mean, that's what the total restoration of the buildings would be, using the park as a plaza and not dealing with any of the horticultural things. But it also didn't envision people like David Culp coming along or the county stepping in
No, I
and
agree.
throwing money.
I'm a real appreciative of the
Yeah, so
volunteers and everything.
there was a $4 million budget that we accepted back then as, okay, long-term, 2010, now we're in 2019. And secondarily, you know, there is no other use for the fee in lieu of funds other than recreation. You can't use it for the fire company, unfortunately.
I
And-
understand that. I'm saying I would rather use our general funds to help them out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we shouldn't be on the budget anymore, the general budget, general account, and we're not.
Or any budget, because you allocated that what you needed for that year, and
Yeah,
I think that, you know, we have other parks, we have other needs.
well, there's $800,000 in that account, and 140 or so is earmarked for us.
I know
I don't
it's
know of
been
any
over
other,
$1 million, though, just in the budget over the last 10 years.
pardon me?
Been over $1 million spent towards Bondsville Mill over the last 10 years.
There
9
has
years.
I think
been,
that's under $1 million.
well,
800 and some thousand, 850,000?
890. But the fact is that we're at a point now, we can make it into
50%
something.
this year. If it was based on the 237 worst-case scenario, it would be 50% of what was spent in the last 9 years in 1 year. I don't think that's appropriate.
Well, I'll get back to the fee in lieu of fund. There's $800,000 in there. There's $650 net that's available. We're only asking for $47,500 of that. It cannot be used for any other park, anything else other than parks. I don't know of any other major projects in the township that are going on right now or that would be ongoing in the future. I haven't heard.
Either.
I haven't heard of anything, and there's also more development, they're putting money into that fund. So if you're not gonna spend it on active recreation, I don't know, it just sits there. And after 10 years, if a developer were to come back and say, you don't think so?
No, we looked at that. The NBC doesn't require these funds to be
Okay.
returned. The traffic fee, yes, but not this.
All right.
It does have to be utilized for these purposes, though.
Right, but
If
so
it's
it can
not,
sit
then
there
it-
ad infinitum, it can sit there in perpetuity.
I think we should.
I'd also like to point out that what has been spent on Bondsville Mill Park for the development is significantly less than what was spent on the community park for the development of that.
I know, but I think maybe we should look into maybe amending our open space requirements with development and give them the option to say, help us construct this and put it on the developer rather than put it in a bank. If that's what the township's needs are to finish a park, then, and that's what majority of the township residents would like, then I think maybe we should possibly look into having developers do it, because it'll be done a lot faster, I think, and then utilize the volunteers.
Well, isn't that what they're doing with the fee in lieu of?
No, I'm saying rather than paying a fee, give them the option of actually doing the build-out.
We can't require improvements off-site
Give
for
them
land
the option,
development.
it'll be actually cheaper for them, I believe.
I think we'd be in violation of the law, having them just volunteer their time. I mean, we tried to have that done in order to avoid this whole estimates anyway, to begin with. So, and we can't do that. We have to abide by the law. We have to get
Amend the
prevailing
ordinance,
wage.
I believe.
No, I mean, I think it's a negotiation you can have with developers, but I think sitting as a developer, you're not gonna wanna, you're not stable, you're not mobilized to work on a different site. There's all kind of insurance issues that would come in. I'm not saying it's not worth
No, it might be
asking, you can ask it. I don't even think you have to change your ordinance, because I think the MPC enabling legislation speaks to that. But I think it's gonna be frowned upon by developers, but it's not, doesn't mean you can't ask, but I don't see them, they wanna just write a check. They go to a construction financing, they know what their costs are as far as their fee in lieu of, they just as soon write you the check rather than have to enter a contract. We would then have to enter a contract with them, there'd be indemnification, insurance, it would be overly complicated for them, I think.
They have the subcontract relationships where they can very much make it mandatory for their subs to
Yeah,
give
it-
them a fair price.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds easy, there's a lot more complication, a lot more red tape involved, but it doesn't mean you can't make that request. But my only point is that I think you're only having to spend such a small amount to get a lot of state money. So here's an opportunity where you can save the rest of that money in that account. For only $47,500, you can get the state grants. So that's an opportunity to think about.
So here's where I would be with this. Again, at 250, I was starting to close my eyes. It was a tough pill to swallow. Me personally, I'm okay with the 47,000. But what I would also like to do is put it in the back of your heads that this may come back to be a line item subtracted from your 2020 budget. If we're at a crucial point where we need to look at our pennies, which we always do, but more so at that time. And the other thing is, I think HUD, you just specified no more general fund, and I agree with that too. I haven't been here that long, so this is a park. It should be the open space and
I
parks.
agree.
So that's my stance on it right now. Obviously, we heard.
Is it your opinion that using the open space in FIA has saved the township $140,000
This year,
this budget?
yeah.
That's a cost savings to the township?
Yeah, because it's something that you have to utilize only for parks and recreation. So by taking it out of the general budget, whosever idea that was a great idea. I mean, it earmarks this at a time when we needed it, and the township didn't need that additional cost.
Well, I just wanted to get opinions to be able to answer some of the unhappy residents about saying that it was wasted $60,000 for a report that we just said we just saved 140, so. That was all.
Well, if they made the suggestion, it was a good suggestion. I mean, I can't,
But that was one of them, yeah.
yep.
Jay?
So,
I'd make a motion, we adopt Resolution 04 of 2019 with the revision that the match be $47,500.
And I'll second, again, with my notations from earlier.
I'm gonna say no at this point.
All in favor?
Aye.
all right, so there's the resolution, and then there's the contract signature page. Did you have that in their packet as well, Nick?
I think the resolution authorizes you to sign the contract.
No, the staff's prepared at the end of the meeting to have page 2 of the contract document that has lines for the board to execute.
Yeah.
I don't know that would,
Part of the application, which is what the resolution is authorizing, requires the execution of the contract.
Correct.
So I think by
Three-
approving the resolution, you're authorizing the contract to be entered.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Doesn't
Three
hurt to
original
tell-
signed contracts. And we need that for the grant next week,
Well,
so I'll
to
be
the-
back to talk.
If you think it's necessary, I'll make a motion that we approve the Round 31 grant contract between East Brandywine Township and the County of Chester for the Bondsville Mill project.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. You will not be disappointed. This is gonna be great.
Thank you.
Public comment on agenda items.
Matt Canapesky, 425 Creek Road. I'd like to discuss the Wissahickon water plant. How did the township acquire that? That's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I wasn't here for that, so I'll let,
Was acquired as open space for the Hillendale project.
From the Hillendale project.
Correct.
And then, Ms. Camp, you did look into my deed?
I didn't look into your deed. You sent us a copy of your deed that had a title company's name on the top, prepared by return to, it had your title company name.
Well, my parcel was created in 1960 from that property and from the Inslee's property. Now, I have three different areas, 3.2, 3.3, 2.2 as labeled. I hired two surveyors. The surveyors say that right now, with the documented delineated area, it's only 1.2 acres. So Ms. Camp repeatedly says that this township has absolutely no involvement with this, but I'm curious to how the township acquired 7.7 acres of land, which was the inception of my property. And if you're so confident with those boundaries, how come you can't answer where my boundaries are?
so the Wissahick, and I'm not 100%.
Wissahickon Spring Water Company.
I know it's on 282,
Yep.
and I remember from back in another conversation about the Verizon thing a while back, somebody had said the wells are on one side of the road, and that people used to go and fill up water bottles. I remember we talked about this for something else, but, so the wells are on one side of 282, and the plant is on the other side of 282?
Correct.
Correct.
And by wells, you mean artisan wells, where natural water
I
comes to
believe-
the surface and is protected federally.
Yep.
So if you
I
guys
don't-
don't even know the location of them, I find it really alarming that you're considering demolition. And, I mean, I know all the answers to these questions, I'm simply putting them on the record, but I'd like to move forward to Mr. Van Loo. I mean, I see him doing tree work right up the street with cigarettes hanging out of their mouths. They got no partitions keeping the public or school buses from underneath this tree work. And I'm wondering, do these guys have the appropriate insurance to be performing a tree service, especially in such a high-traffic area? And then how are they doing a project like that, 40 or 50 sycamore trees, and now they're gonna do a demolition of the water plant? Are they insured for that?
Well, the township would be insured, but I was more concerned with the hurting of our equipment. That's what I was
But his
stating.
title's Roadmaster. When are we gonna get the potholes fixed and everything? If he's busy doing tree work and demolition while we're all slamming our rims onto these potholes and everything, I mean, what's going on?
He did write to PennDOT for 282 though, because that is pretty bad.
The township can't work on state roads. The township has
I
no
didn't see
legal
anything about
obligation to work on state
282.
roads.
He's got the
I'm just saying
title
on record that he
Roadmaster.
is.
What about Hopewell Road on the blind turn where those giant potholes are? Who flipped the excavator into the foundation right by,
Supposed to be agenda.
on
items.
322 down the street there?
It was a private contractor.
That was a private contractor. So that did happen and you are aware of it. So you understand, like, there are unforeseen obstacles that arise. And we shouldn't have a guy who fixes potholes and mows grass taking down structures. Can we
Taking
agree
down
on that?
structures before.
What's that?
He took down structures before, which was the previous police station and other structures on this property to build this building.
I think we should look into the insurance to make sure it's covered.
Yeah, I don't have a
Not
problem with that, I agree.
Sure.
That's a good point.
Well, it's already done. I'm wondering why.
No, looking into, Supervisor Winters had said to make sure that we have the proper insurance for for the demolition of the building. I agree with that.
And then what about ENS control? Do you have an
Well,
ENS
and that would be the
project?
same thing. I would expect no different, that's exactly what I just told Bondsville Mill, that there would be no different from, well, you weren't here for their last meeting, in the morning session. Provided they're following the same protocol that any citizen would be required to do, I don't have a problem with it, but they were made well aware of the same thing. And the township would follow the same protocol for their own permits. And I think Luke had stated that earlier too, that in order to do this, they would have to follow the same protocol.
Well, I mean, I brought these topics up several times to Scott Pearsall years ago about the condition of the building. Why wasn't the condition of the building addressed when it was privately owned and now it's absorbed by the taxpayers' money?
Well, you're talking about.
Which building are you referring to? If you're referring to Wissahickon, we never discussed that.
I have the emails, Scott. I can send them to you tomorrow.
Okay, but the Wissahickon, again, now we're talking about the road crew doing the demolition to save the taxpayers' money rather than hiring a private out firm to do the work.
How do you know a local constituent isn't a demo company? So you're actually taking work from the public. Just like, guess who had the tree work for Culbertson Run? Mike Mize, president of the company. I've been there for 3 different presidents of that neighborhood. Now I understand it's a public road and everything, but how are you justifying taking down 45 sycamore trees that make the neighborhood and aesthetically are the entire value of all those property, and then you have all these other things where they're just dumping mud right down the storm drains into the Brandywine.
Yeah, the sycamore trees, the ones that are being removed were ones that were causing significant storm damage, significant pavement damage and erosion on the properties. And I believe, being part of that most of the residents were the ones complaining that they wanted them out.
And then what significant road damage?
Matt could answer it better than I
It
could,
was
but
part of the design for the swell on the side, for eroding away. The roots were causing damage from what Cedarville said, and the reason I believe the road department took on that responsibility was because it's our responsibility because it was in the right of way.
But this is Cedarville's opinion, and how do they make money again? Designing these plans, right? And then I watched the video where they also needed a, $8,000 increase for the same plan?
26.
I mean, this just keeps going and going. But back to the initial question, Ms. Camp, you repeatedly say that you're not a party to this whatsoever. How did you guys obtain that property on March 31st for $1?
It's been answered at least 5 times for meetings I've been at. It was dedicated from the developer. As part of the SALDO requirements, which we talked about before, the fee in lieu of, they can dedicate open space land to the township. As part of that development, that land was dedicated to the township.
And
That is the 5th time.
how much land
I
was
have
dedicated?
no idea. I wasn't the solicitor then.
she wasn't there
I
then,
wasn't the
so
solicitor then,
I have to-
but there's a deed
But you are
recorded.
now, and you have been for a year.
No, I haven't
You
looked at
just
that.
said I asked the same question 5
You have, and it's
times.
been answered 5 times.
And you just said, I don't know, though.
When
No,
was-
I said I didn't know the acreage. I didn't look at
Well,
the
I know
deed.
it says 7.7,
And
7.63,
I
and
recommended in my last
7.1.
email to you that if you believe that somehow your acreage is gone, then go back to your title company, let them know that, contact a surveyor, and hire a lawyer. But the township lawyer isn't your lawyer.
This is
board
East
isn't your-
Brandywine Township. It absolutely is
but
my
it's a
concern.
civ-
and my-
it's a
But the
civil
lawyer
issue.
represents the board of supervisors and the staff. We don't represent the residents of the township.
If the township acquired this property and my property was created from that property and I have different acreages, why can't you tell me where the boundaries of
Because
my
that's
property?
not what I'm hired to do.
Well,
I'm
then
not
tell me.
hired to represent
Well, then
you
tell
and
me where the
protect your interests.
boundaries of the water
Not
plant
a
are.
surveyor. You're gonna have to hire a surveyor, sir.
You're not a board, you're not a supervisor either. So why don't you let the supervisors
Because you're asking
answer?
me a question. You've asked me twice.
You had asked her the
You
question.
asked me twice, Matt.
Okay.
why don't-
Did you not?
Did you answer any of my emails? If you answer my emails, I wouldn't be at
I'm
this
not permitted to
podium.
be answering resident emails.
All right,
I
well,
have to be authorized by the
we're getting
board.
off topic. So your concern, and I'm trying to figure this out for my own sake of knowing here. Your concern is that you believe that the Wissahickon plant that was acquired by the township includes some of your property, or am I misreading that?
Possibly.
Might be changing. our property might be changing too.
It's changing repeatedly.
Maybe we should look into that then.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have a problem with looking into that. If it's something that we've acquired that has a piece of your property, I don't have a problem with that. However, what I don't understand is, how a surveying mistake or deed mistake from your property when was it that you had purchased? the pro-
Well, when I purchased the property, 2007. The deed was created in 1960.
So,
How do you know that building is on your property and not mine?
Maybe we should check that.
yeah, as I say, I don't have a problem with reasonable requests when it's something that the township has an involvement with. But as Solicitor Camp is stating, with an attorney helping a resident out, if it weren't something that related to a piece of property that the township had a vested interest in.
We got a saying for Miss Camp around my circle. It's Wendy's doesn't sell curly fries. Yeah, Miss Camp, we know. That's all she does is misdirect questions and everything and never answers direct questions.
Well, you're
ever.
entitled to your opinion, but right now, we're getting again off topic. We will discuss the boundary per se of the Wissahickon property to the best of our ability. I'm not promising you anything to find out what property boundaries were included in this.
Well, while you're not promising me anything, how are you gonna keep taking my property taxes when you don't know whether I got 3.2, 1.2, or 2.2?
We're gonna look into it. I think
I don't think it's the township's responsibility to determine how much property he has.
it is if it's coming from our bottling plant that we own.
Well, it can't come from the,
Ours must be getting bigger. If ours gets smaller, his gets bigger.
his isn't shrinking. He has a
It's the
deed,
same
whatever the
as his
deed
deed.
is, that's what the property is that he owns.
How did it change?
This,
He has a
That's
recorded
what he's
deed.
asking.
this
It
property,
didn't, that's the point. I'm not gonna get involved.
this property, the property that we acquired as part of that subdivision was surveyed when the subdivision was done.
By who?
I don't remember who did the survey, but it was,
Would have been E.B. Walsh.
no,
It's whoever
the developer did a survey of the property, marked the property boundaries, drew the map,
And prepared a legal description that your engineer would have reviewed for the land that was being dedicated to the township. And in that review, I would have assumed, I wasn't here, I would have assumed they would have checked to make sure that it was land that was owned by whoever it was that was dedicating it. I don't know if it was Southdown Homes or whoever the entity was.
All right, so
They wouldn't have allowed a deed to
And-
be
Right,
recorded
I agree,
that included Mr.
But I-
Kanapesky's land.
small discrepancies in the acreage don't mean that there's any real change in the property ownership. Now,
Half of my property missing is a small
Mr.
discrepancy.
Kanapensky, when I'm talking, I would appreciate it if you don't interrupt me. I've sat here and listened to you, so you can do the same when I'm talking.
You work for me.
No,
Fisher.
you,
Sir.
all right, all right.
so what I was saying was, it's frequently the case when you look at different kinds of records, which is what Mr. Kanapensky is doing. When you look at an assess.
Kanapensky is the fake last name that is the title identity theft.
When you may have a certain acreage that appears on a deed description, and then sometimes when the tax assessment office makes a record, it may be a little bit different. If somebody looks at a GIS map of it, it can be a different amount, but the property is not really changing in size. Those discrepancies don't change what is owned. The only way that anybody can determine exactly how much property they have and where it is to have a survey done of the property and have the surveyor mark the property boundaries.
Right, but we just said E.B. Walsh did our survey.
E.B. Walsh did a survey for Lowe, Jack Lowe, when he created this original subdivision plan.
When was that? 2001, 6 years before I even bought the property. This was a setup way before I even entered this thing.
I'm a little confused. I think maybe
Doesn't matter. I've had enough tonight. You guys can think things over. Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Any other public comment for agenda items? Seeing none, A notice, the board did meet for executive session. The Board of Supervisors met for executive session following their work session meeting on Thursday, February 7th, 2019, in order to discuss legal matters. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.